The sound came at 2:17 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had been awake anyway, the way you're awake at 2 a.m. in an unfamiliar place when the silence is the wrong kind of silence, too complete, the kind that city people notice when they're somewhere without traffic. The cabin was supposed to be empty except for me. I had rented it for 3 weeks, remote work plus whatever passed for a vacation when you were 31, and your definition of vacation was working in a different location than usual. The listing had said private, fully equipped, mountain views, and currently undergoing minor exterior renovations which would not affect the guest experience. Minor exterior renovations. I had interpreted this as someone painting a fence, maybe replacing a railing. I had not interpreted it as what I found when I arrived. Scaffolding on the south wall, a contractor's truck in the driveway, a collection of power tools arranged on the porch with the confidence of objects that plan to stay, and a note taped to the front door that said, "Work begins 8 a.m. We'll be out of your way by 5. Sorry for any inconvenience." The note was unsigned. I had called the rental company. They had confirmed that yes, there were some scheduled exterior repairs. They had mentioned it in the listing. Had I not seen it? I had not seen it. They offered me a 10% discount. I took it because the cabin was otherwise exactly what I needed, which was quiet and far from Denver, and equipped with reliable internet that I had tested twice before booking. So I had settled in, and for the first 4 days, the arrangement worked. A truck arrived at 8. Power tools operated at a respectful volume until 5. Whoever was doing the work was efficient and unobtrusive, and I barely registered their presence except as background noise during my afternoon calls. I did not think about who was doing the work. I did not think about where they went at 5, until 2:17 a.m. on the 5th night, when something moved in the kitchen. I lay in bed for approximately 30 seconds, reasoning with myself. Old cabin, mountain location. Probably an animal that had found a gap somewhere, a raccoon or a squirrel, something that could be dealt with in the morning. Then something opened the refrigerator. Raccoons, as far as I knew, did not open refrigerators. I got up. I found the heaviest object within reach, which was a hardcover book I had been meaning to read for 2 years, and I walked down the short hallway to the kitchen. The refrigerator was closed. A woman was standing in front of it, eating leftover pasta out of the container with a fork. She was wearing paint-stained work pants and a thermal shirt, her hair in a messy bun, and she was reading something on her phone while she ate, and she did not notice me for approximately 4 full seconds, which was long enough for me to take in the entire situation and arrive at complete confusion. Then she looked up. We stared at each other. She said, "I can explain." I said, "That's my pasta." She looked at the container. She looked at me. "I can also explain that," she said. Her name was Sadie Marsh. She was the contractor doing the exterior work. She was also, as it turned out, sleeping in the cabin, not in the main bedroom, which was mine, and not in a way that used any of the main cabin's resources during the hours I was awake. She had a sleeping bag in the small utility room off the back porch, the one I had assumed contained cleaning supplies and had therefore not investigated. She had been using the kitchen after midnight when she was confident I was asleep. She had been washing her dishes and putting everything back where she found it. She had been living in the utility room for, she told me, 11 days. I sat down at the kitchen table. She put the pasta back in the refrigerator, then seemed to reconsider and took it back out and held it. "Finish it," I said, "and then explain." She finished the pasta. She explained. She had been contracted to do the exterior work by the rental company, which had a standing arrangement with her for the properties she maintained. The job was supposed to take 2 weeks. She had been living out of her truck for most of the winter, moving between job sites, which was financially efficient but physically wearing, and when she'd arrived at this particular cabin and found the utility room unlocked and reasonably weatherproof, she had made a decision she acknowledged was not strictly defensible. "I wasn't using anything," she said. "I wasn't in the main cabin. I figured if I was careful. You were eating my pasta. That was the first time," she said. "I miscalculated my groceries this week." I looked at her. She had the expression of someone who was prepared to be thrown out but was hoping she wouldn't be. "How long is the job?" I said. 9 more days. And after that? I have a job in Telluride starting the following week. I can sleep in the truck until then. I looked at the window above the kitchen sink, which showed nothing but dark and the suggestion of mountains. "It's February," I said. "I have a good sleeping bag." I thought about this. "There's a couch," I said. She looked at me. "In the living room," I said. "It's more comfortable than a utility room, probably warmer." She was quiet for a moment. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," I said. "Finish your explanation first." She explained for another 20 minutes, which was longer than the situation probably required, but which I didn't interrupt because she explained well, with the specific directness of someone who has decided that honesty is the only remaining option and is committing to it fully. She was 30 years old. She had been a contractor for 6 years, working primarily in mountain properties, exterior renovation and repair. She owned her own business, just her and the occasional subcontractor she brought in for larger jobs. She had a storage unit in Glenwood Springs where her furniture was, a situation she described without self-pity as temporary, and which she had been describing as temporary for 8 months. She was not behind on anything. She was not in debt beyond normal operating costs. She was simply in the gap between selling her apartment last spring and having enough consistent winter income to justify signing a lease, and the gap had lasted longer than planned. "I wasn't trying to steal anything," she said. "I just needed somewhere that wasn't the truck for a few weeks." "You were eating my pasta," I said. "I'll buy you more pasta." "It was leftover delivery," I said. "From the place in Telluride. They don't deliver up here." She winced. "I'll figure something out," she said. I looked at her across the kitchen table at 2:45 in the morning, this woman who had been living in my utility room for 11 days and had been careful enough that I hadn't known, and I thought about what it would take to maintain that level of consideration for a stranger whose space you were quietly sharing, and I thought that it took a specific kind of person, and that the specific kind of person it took was not the kind you threw out into a February night. "The couch," I said. 9 days. You use the bathroom in the mornings before 8 so I don't have to explain anything to myself. You stop eating my food, I'll add you to the grocery run." She looked at me for a long moment. "Why?" she said. "Because it's February," I said, "and the truck is cold, and you fixed the railing on the porch yesterday without being asked," which I noticed. Something in her expression shifted. Not gratitude exactly. Something more complicated. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. I went back to bed. I lay awake for another hour thinking about the fact that there had been a person living in my utility room for 11 days, and I had noticed nothing, which said something either about her competence or my obliviousness, and I was not entirely sure which. Here is what the next 9 days were like. She was at work by 8, which I knew, because I could hear the power tools starting up, and because my coffee was already made when I came downstairs, which happened on the second morning, and continued every morning after that, without comment from either of us. She finished by 5. She came inside, cleaned up in the small bathroom by the back porch that I had not been using, and then she was in the living room with whatever she was working on, which was usually paperwork related to her business, or a technical drawing for an upcoming job. I worked at the kitchen table. She worked on the couch. We were in the same space for approximately 4 hours each evening, and we talked for maybe 45 minutes of that time, the rest being a comfortable working silence that I had not expected. I learned things. She had grown up in Durango. Her father was a carpenter, which was where she had learned to build things. She had studied architecture for 2 years before deciding she preferred the building to the designing, which her professors had taken personally, and which she did not regret. She had been running her own business since she was 24 and had opinions about load-bearing walls and proper insulation and the specific way that mountain properties were almost universally under-insulated, which she could explain at length and did, on the third evening, when I made the mistake of asking about the south wall. I did not find this boring. I found it interesting in the way I found things interesting when the person explaining them was interested in them, which was the best way to become interested in anything. She asked me what I did. I told her, software, product side, mostly remote for the past 2 years, which was why I could spend 3 weeks in a Colorado cabin in February without professional consequences. She said, "That sounds like the opposite of my job." I said, "Yours is more physical." She said, "Mine is more finished. At the end of the day, something is either fixed or it isn't. I always know exactly what I did." I thought about my day, which had consisted of 4 hours of email, 2 calls about a product roadmap that had not been resolved, and a document I had been revising for 3 weeks. "I'm not sure I know what I did today," I said. She looked at me. "Does that bother you?" she said. "More than it used to," I said. She went back to her paperwork. I went back to my document. But I kept thinking about it. On the 5th evening, it snowed. Not a dusting. The real kind, the kind that comes in from the west and fills the mountains overnight and changes everything by morning. She stood at the kitchen window watching it come down and said, "I need to get the tools under cover." I put on my coat. She looked at me. "I know where they are," I said. We went out and covered the equipment and moved what needed moving, and by the time we came back inside, we were both covered in snow, and she made hot chocolate with the supplies she had added to the grocery run, which she had insisted on contributing to equally, and which had resulted in the cabin being significantly better stocked than when I'd arrived. We sat at the kitchen table with hot chocolate, and she said, "Thank you." "It's your job site," I said. "It's your vacation," she said. I looked out the window at the snow. "I've been wondering," I said, "if I'm doing vacation wrong." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "What does doing it right look like?" she said. "I thought it looked like this," I said, "working somewhere quieter, different air. But I've done the same amount of work I would have done in Denver, and I've looked at the mountains maybe twice." She was quiet for a moment. "I look at them every day," she said, "from the scaffolding. It's the best part of the job. What do they look like from up there?" She thought about it. "Like the work is small," she said, "in a good way. Like whatever you're fixing is just a small thing, and the mountain has been there the whole time, and will keep being there." I looked at her. "That's a useful thing to remember," I said. "Most things you can see from scaffolding are," she said, and smiled, which was the first time I had seen her smile fully, and which was the kind of smile that reorganizes something. On the 7th day, she fixed the window in the bedroom. I hadn't mentioned it. There was a draft from the upper left corner that I had been managing with an extra blanket and had not thought to raise because it seemed small and the cabin was otherwise fine. She knocked on the bedroom door at 4:30, which was a first. "The window," she said. When I opened it, I noticed a draft. "I can fix it now if it's not a bad time. It'll take 20 minutes. I said it wasn't a bad time. She fixed it in 18 minutes. Standing in the doorway watching her work, I had the specific thought of a person who has been paying attention without meaning to, which was that she noticed things. Not just structural things, not just the professional obligations of someone hired to maintain a property. She noticed the things that would make it better for whoever was there. The railing she'd fixed without being asked. The coffee every morning. The window draft she'd caught from outside somehow, through the gap's effect on something she could see from the scaffolding. "How did you know about the draft?" I said. "The curtain," she said, without stopping. "There's a particular way it moves when there's a gap. You see it from outside sometimes." "You were watching my curtain." "I was watching the building," she said. "The curtain was part of the building." She finished, tested the window, and left. I stood in the bedroom for a moment, thinking about someone who watched buildings the way other people watched people, looking for where the gaps were, figuring out how to fix them. On the 9th day, which was her last, I drove to Telluride and got delivery from the restaurant. I did not tell her I was doing this. I drove 45 minutes each way in the mountain roads and came back with the same order I had originally gotten, which she had eaten 11 days ago in my kitchen at 2 a.m., and I set it on the table when she came in from her last day of work. She stopped in the doorway. She looked at the food. She looked at me. "That's from Telluride," she said. "They don't deliver up here," I said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat down. "You drove to Telluride," she said. "It's not that far. It's 45 minutes. I had a call I needed to take anyway," I said, hands free. She looked at me with the expression of someone deciding whether to say something. She said, "You didn't have a call." I might have had a call. Marcus. It was the first time she had used my name. "Okay," I said. "I didn't have a call." She looked at the food. "Thank you," she said quietly. We ate dinner and she told me about the Telluride job, a large property with significant rot damage in the exterior siding that was going to take 4 weeks if the weather cooperated, and 6 if it didn't. I told her about the product launch that was happening while I was here, which I was technically not working on but was following closely enough that technically was doing some work. At some point she said, "Are you going to stay the rest of your time?" "1 more week," I said. "Why?" She shrugged. "You seem more relaxed than when you got here." "I've been sleeping better," I said. "Probably the altitude." She looked at me. "Probably," she said. She left the next morning at 7. The truck packed, the tools gone, the scaffolding taken down the previous afternoon. The cabin was exactly as it had been before she arrived, except for the fixed railing and the sealed window and the curtain that moved the way curtains move when there are no gaps. She knocked on the door at 7 to say goodbye, which she didn't have to do. I opened it. "The south wall is done," she said. "The property manager has the report. Everything's solid." "I know," I said. "I could tell." She nodded. She looked like she was going to say something else, and then didn't. I said, "The Telluride job." "Which property?" She told me. It was a name I could find if I looked it up, which was information I filed away in the specific way of someone doing something he didn't want to examine too closely. "Drive safe," I said. "Enjoy your last week," she said. She got in the truck and drove down the mountain road, and I watched until I couldn't see the truck anymore, and then I went inside and stood in the kitchen and looked at the coffee maker and thought about how 2:17 a.m. had divided my life into before and after in a way I had not seen coming. I called her 2 weeks later. I had her number from the rental company paperwork, which I had looked up with more intentionality than I wanted to admit. She answered on the 3rd ring and said, "Marcus, you remembered," I said. "You drove to Telluride," she said. "I remember things like that." I said, "How's the Telluride job?" 6 weeks, she said. "Weather didn't cooperate." "Are you sleeping in a truck?" A pause. "There's a bunkhouse on the property," she said. "It's fine." "Good," I said. Another pause. "Was there something specific?" she said. "Or—" "I was going to ask," I said, "if you wanted to have dinner. When the job is done, I can drive to Telluride. I know a place." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "They don't deliver up here." "I know," I said. "I'll come get you." I could hear her smiling, the specific sound of it, which I knew because I had been paying attention. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. Outside my Denver apartment window, the city was doing what cities do in March, gray and persistent and nothing like the mountains. I thought about a window with no draft, a railing that didn't wobble, a curtain that moved the right way. 45 minutes was not that far. The dinner was on a Thursday in April. I drove to Telluride. I knew the place. I had been there twice now. She was waiting outside the property when I pulled up, which meant she had been watching for the car, which I chose to find encouraging. She looked different outside of a work context. Same practical clothes, but her hair was down, which I had not seen before, and she had the expression of someone who was slightly uncertain and trying not to show it, which I recognized because I had the same expression and was trying to do the same thing. I said, "You look different without the paint." She said, "You look different without the cabin." We went inside. We ordered. We talked. We talked for 3 hours. which was longer than either of us had planned and which neither of us ended. At some point, she said, "You drove 45 minutes twice for this." "The first time was for pasta," I said. "This time is different." She looked at me. "How is it different?" she said. I thought about 2:17 a.m. and the refrigerator and a woman eating pasta and explaining herself with more honesty than the situation required. I thought about 9 days of coffee already made and a window fixed without being asked, and the sound of someone smiling through a phone from 100 miles away. "The first time," I said, "I was replacing something. This time I'm not replacing anything." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's a very Marcus way to say something. Is it good or bad?" "It's very good," she said. We walked out into the Telluride night, which was cold and clear and full of stars in the way that mountain nights are full of stars, too many to count, more than you remember being possible. She looked up at them. "You can't see this from Denver," I said. "No," she said. "I've been thinking about that." She looked at me. "About the stars?" "About what you said," I said. "From the scaffolding, that the work is small and the mountain has been there the whole time." She waited. "I've been doing the same work in the same place for 4 years," I said, "and I went to a cabin to remember why it mattered, and instead I found a person living in my utility room, and somehow that did it better." She laughed. "The real one, the one that reorganized things. I was not trying to provide perspective," she said. "I was trying not to get thrown out." "I know," I said. "That's what made it work." We stood there in the mountain night, and she reached over and took my hand, and I thought about a cabin in February and a sound at 2:17 a.m., and how the best things rarely announce themselves as important when they happen. They just happen, and then later you understand what they were.